Business is grinding to a halt across the United States as local governments step up efforts to contain the coronavirus, while economists are predicting a lasting impact on the U.S. economy and our healthcare system as well. Treasury Secretary Steve Bannon is forecasting, quote, a gigantic fourth quarter. Watch.
You're going to see a lot of pent-up demand. So I think you're going to see, when we get through the next few months and Americans see what's happening and we've killed this virus, people are going to be comfortable going back to work. We're going to be opening back businesses, and people are going to continue what they do.
And that was Stephen Mnuchin with me last week on Mornings with Maria. I want to bring in Steve Bannon, a former White House chief strategist. Steve, it is good to see you this morning. You have an idea in terms of what this economy should be doing. Tell us what your reaction is to the current stimulus and plans in place for these shutdowns or stay-in-home orders from various states.
Well, look, the president's a wartime president. You know, my colleague Jason Miller identified the president of that back in January when the president took the first big, bold move, which was to shut down all air traffic from China and to then quarantine people as they came into the United States that had the virus. You've seen his activity with Governor Cuomo working on this horrible situation in the New York medical system where President Trump has kind of turned American industry into an arsenal for democracy or an arsenal for health care to start building more ventilators and getting more masks out, et cetera. So you see these kind of wartime efforts. If you look at this situation we're in, you got to put it in three buckets. The pandemic, the economic crisis caused by the pandemic, both the short term and the deeper things on the supply chain, and then the financial crisis that's now on top of it in every financial market across every asset class in the world. And I think, I really respect Secretary Wolf, and I understand the mitigation strategy. But I think, and if you listen to Paul Bedard, I think it was at the Washington Examiner, said there was discussion starting about a much tougher, a much tougher solution that got us there quicker. You know, I don't think we have months to do this. I think what should happen, and my recommendation would be to kind of dovetail with President Trump's action, and get it done yesterday, is to drop the hammer. Don't mitigate the virus. Don't spread the curve, shatter the curve, and go full hammer on the virus right now with a full shutdown. Use the stimulus to kind of bridge that economic crisis. It may take $2 trillion, it may take $3 trillion to force cash into the little entrepreneur and to the little guy. And you do that. You got Steve Cortez's got a plan. Eric Bolling's got a plan. Bernie Marcus's Job Creators Networks has a plan of forcing cash into the system. That bridges us. Whether it takes 2 weeks or 4 weeks, we get through this hard and fast. And on the capital market side, you basically do what Kevin Warsh and Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke are arguing for in the Financial Times and Wall Street Journal, which is merge the balance sheet of the Fed and the Treasury and use that as a lender, of last resort to actual corporations. What the ECB and the Bank of England have been doing, we turned that balance sheet to save all the big companies, okay? You save Boeing, you save the airline industry, you save all the big investment-grade credits. You then solve the liquidity crisis and you solve the solvency crisis. Look, it's going to blow up our balance sheet. I don't know, $3, $4, $5 trillion, but we have to get through this. And what you do, one of the things I learned from President Trump, he calls me his best student, is that he is about getting it done yesterday. And if you want to get it done yesterday, you drop the hammer today on the virus.
Drop the hammer today. Look, I know that you started a show back in January. You saw the seriousness of this. In January, you had it, war room pandemic. You were the first to call Trump a wartime president. And I understand in your voice, in your tone, the emergency that we're talking about. But Ted Cruz tweeted this today. In negotiations for economic crisis relief, some are pushing for a special carve-out just for Boeing and GE. That would be wrong. Millions are losing their jobs. We don't need bailouts or corporate welfare. Those companies should participate in the same liquidity programs as everybody else. Steve, you know, once you start bailing out one industry and one company, everybody else is going to want it. You're talking about shutting down a $22 trillion economy for a period of time. What is that going to look like on the other side, Steve? I mean, there's a reason the Journal wrote that op-ed, rethinking the coronavirus strategy. President
Trump is a wartime president. One of the wartime figures he admires is General Patton. General Patton said a simple plan violently executed today beats a more complicated plan that takes months and months to execute. We have to get through the pandemic part of this. We have to get through the virus. You see what's happening to the medical system in New York, okay? You have to get through this, and if you're going to go through hell, let's go through it as fast as possible. You have a bridging event. That bridge is the cash you put into the system to the little guy, much of what they're working on Capitol Hill, but there's also better ways to do it. To force cash into the system for the little guy. And then for the bigger guys, you obviously are going to have different negotiations. Yes, if they had shareholder buyback programs, maybe you work around the edges on that. We don't want to have a situation like in 2008 where basically the elites made all the money. However, we have plenty of time to adjudicate that on the other side of this. We have an economic inferno coming at us, okay? Secretary Mnuchin was talking about 20% unemployment. Remember, from the great crash in 1929, and our stock market over the last 3 weeks has been like the great crash in 29. When Roosevelt was elected, that was 2.5 years later. Unemployment didn't drop really off the market until 31 and 32. Now it's going to drop next week and the following week. That's why you have to get on top of this today. Look, President Trump's greatest virtue is his entrepreneurial spirit, his toughness, and his focus. Okay, and I'm just saying right now, not mitigate it, hammer it. And you're going to have to take the pain up front. We're going to have to shut it all down to kill the pandemic, bridge it with the cash infusion, and then take care of the solvency and liquidity problem with using the Fed and the Treasury Department to actually lend to corporate credits.
What you're saying is you want the powers that be to flood this economy with cash. You want those balance sheets combined, flood it with cash, send money to everybody, and deal with this later in terms of the impact to the economy. We've already lost how much in market value? 20? $25 trillion when you look at global markets, Steve. And then we've got a healthcare system on the brink right now. I want to get your take on that. Go ahead.
This is the point. We've already shredded $25 trillion, I think, in all capital markets throughout the world, just on the equity side. Look what's happened on the bond market. Look what's happened to companies. Look what's happened to jobs. We are on the brink of having permanent damage to the greatest economy in the world. Before this started, President Trump and the whole team had a great economy going. We can get back to that. But the way to do it is to hammer it now, go deep, and then the pushback will be, your time up will be even better. But you've got to flood it with cash today. You got to use every power of the Fed. In fact, new powers for the Fed, new powers for the Treasury. This is a war. And people in this town are still thinking of convention like it's 2008. This is so much deeper than 2008. And I'm not saying a giveaway to the corporation. That's the last thing I want.
Right. Yep. We have 20 seconds left here. Do you worry that the healthcare system is on the brink? I was told yesterday by someone who said to me, look, we're only several hours away from no more beds, no more ventilators. Peter Navarro is working on getting the supply chain back here. But what's the impact there? Very quickly, Steve.
The CCP virus that the CCP unleashed on the world has now in the brink of potentially destroying the New York City healthcare system. That's why President Trump and Governor Cuomo are going all in. Every piece of equipment, the Navy's hospital ship, the Army Corps of Engineers, Mayor de Blasio, they're looking for other spaces, the Javits Center. They're going all in for the gating event, the ICUs, the emergency room, and our great first responders, doctors and nurses.
We're gonna check in with the healthcare industry when we talk with the CEO of Johnson & Johnson next. Steve, thank you.